TNC, Original African Stories. Listener discretion is advised as this podcast may contain violence or strong language. Previously on My Name is A-Zed.
Azeez, Uncle Mufu just called me now. He said he had to do with your mother. Call him quickly, I beg.
What's the matter? What did he say?
Yeah, I was hospital.
Mommy.
It's not a big something. She's okay. I just want to tell you to phone her so she can hear your voice.
In 15 minutes, I was in a bus heading to Ibadan.
Hello, Azeez.
Is everything okay? How's Mama?
Everything is fine. The doctor said you should see him whenever you come, but right now, Mama is sleeping. Oh my gosh! What is going on? What is going on?
We're about to...
A-Zed, I'm beyond grateful. I hardly use my car. You can have it.
A-Zed. You don't hammer. I'm going to see Baba Ibidun.
I don't know any Baba Ibidun.
Oh, your money. Please just go into that room, I'll come and give it to you.
She provocatively rubbed her hands against my thighs. She slightly raised her buttocks, which she had rested on me, as she reached for some grapes from the bowl placed near the bedside. She had nothing on but a very transparent night dress. After picking a handful of grapes, she turned around and knelt in between my legs. My head was directly facing her breasts, her firm nipples staring back at me even as she fed me a grape, and then another. Then she put one in her mouth and slid it in and out. I saw a smile grow on her face, even as she bit slightly into the grape and then closed in on my lips for a kiss. Yeah! I woke up. I looked around me, and it took a few seconds before I could process where I was. I was wearing nothing but my boxers, and I was on a bed, Kassy's bed. I turned to my left and saw her then, wearing a transparent night dress, sleeping. What happened? I quietly eased myself out of bed, and as I slipped out, I saw my car keys, phone, and wallet on the bedside table. I saw my clothes well spread out on the chair of the dresser, but no bowl of grapes. I picked up my things, tiptoed to the chair, grabbed my clothes, and quietly left the room. I stepped out and began to wear my jeans. Just then, two girls walked in from another room. I recognized one of them, Debby. She seemed startled as she saw me. She quickly turned around and went back into the other room they had come out of. The other girls stopped to look at me and then continued past me into the living room. I noticed then just how bright it was outside, and I hurriedly wore my jeans while still wearing my shirt. I walked out of the house mumbling a quick good morning to the girl who was then sitting on one of the living room sofas as I got out of the flat. I finally wore my shirt before I got into the car, started the engine, and checked the time. 6:30 a.m. I made to put my wallet in the back pocket of my jeans, and for some reason, I decided to check it. The money I had in there was intact, but I noticed some extra notes. I pulled them out and counted 5 pieces of $20 notes. $100. Again, what happened? What happened? I tried not to think much, seeing that I was somewhat late. I shoved the wallet into my pocket and drove off. I made it to my room just before 9 a.m. I walked in and met some of my many roommates. My room was one of the few rooms that still operated like the Unilag of pre-2000 we often heard stories about. 4 bed spaces, but I had 11 roommates. Squatters, floaters, hangers, whatever you want to call us. Yes, Dari was actually squatting me. He was sprawled out on a mattress somewhere on the floor. I was sure he had only just got into the room from the library. I said my greeting to my fellow roommates, grabbed the bucket and went to take my bath. In another 30 minutes, I was parked outside Princess's building. I brought out my phone to call her, and as I tried running through my contact list, I saw Fadeke's number. I have to call her later. As I was about pressing the call button, my phone rang. It was Princess. Hello, good morning. I'm outside.
I know. I can see you.
Impulsively, I turned around and looked up to see if I could see her. She was standing on one of the balconies high up in the building.
Do you have a suit?
Like a full suit or a jacket.
Never mind. I'm coming down.
Some minutes later, she was in the car. She sat at the passenger's side beside me, like she always did. Where are we off to?
Faculty of Law.
As I approached the faculty park, she reached into her bag and handed me a card.
Stop the car here. It's going to be a busy night. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before now. So just go to the address written on the card and ask for James. He'll attend to you and then meet me back at High Rise by 4 p.m.
Okay. I watched as she walked away in her black skirt and white shirt. She looked so professional, yet graceful. I took another look at the card she gave me. On one side, it had a logo, an A with angel wings, and the word Angeli written beneath it. On the other side was a name, address, and phone number. Awolowo Road, Ikoyi. Not so far. I didn't have any lecture that morning, so I decided to quickly make the trip. As I got outside the gate, the thought of Uncle Mufu came to my mind, and I knew I couldn't go straight. I turned right and decided to go the long way, through Fola Agoro to bust out at Abule Oja. There was a beat-up cab moving very slowly in front of me. I recognized it immediately. It was Emeka, one of the drivers from the park. Lousy was an understatement when defining Emeka. I caught out from behind him and overtook him without turning. I soon got to Ikoyi. The address turned out to be a boutique. A male boutique. I wondered for a second what I was picking up, but then again, it wasn't any of my business. I got in and asked for James. He was a young man, eccentrically dressed, well-spoken, and surprisingly very happy to see me. Before I could ask what I came to pick up, he zipped to the display rack and pulled out a blazer.
Here you go. Try this on.
Me?
Yeah. It should fit you perfectly.
I put on the blazer, and even before I looked in the mirror, I could tell it looked good on me. James adjusted the collar and fit the blazer properly.
Do you like it?
Well...
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Okay, let me pack it for you.
For me? I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Princess asked me to come and pick up something for her.
And that something is what I'm packing up, darling.
I stood there looking bewildered, but that wasn't the end. Before I left the store, James brought me a perfectly fitting shirt, chinos trousers, he kept referring to them as slacks, and a wonderful pair of shoes. He handed it all to me and told me to tell Princess he'd expect her call. I left the store still trying to figure out what had happened, but knowing Princess, I thought maybe she used me to fit the things for someone with a similar stature. I got back to school and not wanting to be seen with the car, I parked it at High Rise. I went back to my room. Dari had left, probably gone to the library again. I went through some of my notes and did some reading before I went for my only class of the day, 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. I made sure I left before the end of the class. I couldn't risk running into anyone that could waste my time. I took the shortcut through hellfire and headed towards the Faculty of Science. But just then I got a text message. It was Princess.
Please change into the clothes you got from James before coming to get me. Thanks.
I stopped in my tracks as I read the message again. I shrugged and walked even faster. I made it to the car and I drove into a corner where I found a way to change. I looked at myself in the side mirror when I was done, and I knew I looked good. I spent some more minutes admiring myself and I eventually snapped out of my moment and drove back to Princess's house. I called her to inform her I was around and she said she would be down soon. 15 minutes later and she wasn't out. That was unlike Princess, but I found out why moments later. Princess walked out of the front door flanked by two other girls. Kassy was on one side and the girl I saw earlier in the day at Kassy's house was on the other side. All of them had on short black dresses in different designs. They all looked attractive and appealing. Princess and Kassy got into the back seat, while the other girls sat in front with me. From the rearview mirror, I noticed a smirk on Kassy's face, even as she complimented my blazer. I expected her to say more, but surprisingly, she didn't. The smirk on her face, however, lingered much longer than usual. Was I dreaming from before? What happened at Kassy's? I started the car and began to drive out. Before I could ask where we were heading, Princess told me,
We're going to Abeokuta.
Abeokuta ke?
Do you know how to get there?
Traveling between Lagos and Ibadan, I often had to go through Abeokuta, especially when the churches had events. I wondered where we were heading in Abeokuta and why we had to leave so late. But as always, I reminded myself that my job was just to drive, and that was what I did. The journey was smooth. Driving a new car makes driving enjoyable. The girls hardly spoke through the journey. They They were all busy typing away on their phones. Once we got to Abeokuta, Princess asked Tomi, the girl who sat in front with me, to give me directions to the destination. I felt like I was having deja vu, like I had been in that exact situation before. What was different? Kassy was at the back seat. We made it to our destination just as it began to get dark. It was a guest house that looked more like a hotel to me. It was hidden somewhere far away on a lonely street, like some sort of treasure. From the moment I drove in, I could imagine the kind of clientele this guest house had. Perfectly done landscape complete with fountains and lights. I had only read about things like this in novels. I drove to the entrance and parked for the girls to get out. Someone already stood beside my door to escort the girls.
A-Zed, please come with us.
With you?
Yeah, please.
I sat in the car still trying to process what I had just heard. It was when the man by my door opened it and ushered me out, I realized it was really happening. I got out of the car and handed the key to the man. Kassy and Tomi were already ahead at the reception. Princess had waited for me to catch up. I walked up to her and she whispered to me,
"It's just a party. Try and relax. Have some fun. I just want you here, close by. That's all."
I said, okay, like I almost always did to Princess. By the time Princess and I got to the reception, a guide was already waiting to lead us in. He walked ahead and we all followed behind him. As we walked, Tomi whispered to Kassy,
"Hey, Mama Cass, see this place. Now my luck shine where Debby papa call am. Now so her papa go to summon her from now on in Jesus' name. Amen."
They both giggled and almost immediately went back to looking serious. The guide ushered us to the poolside. As we walked in, I noticed the party had already started. The poolside was beautiful and the lighting effects were exceptional. I noticed 3 girls in the pool. It wasn't until I looked closer that I realized 2 of the girls were completely nude. Yes, naked. They had no clothes on. The third had a bikini on, but it was completely see-through. There was music playing in the background and I heard voices laughing and talking on different tables around the pool. The poolside area wasn't well lit, so I couldn't make out faces, but I didn't need anyone to tell me just how exclusive this party was. Altogether, there were probably just 30 of us, 5 of which were bodyguards. There were about 20 girls spread out among the tables. When we got to a certain point, the guide asked me to go with him to a particular table, and Princess nodded in agreement. The girls walked on, and they all sat on different tables. I was led to a table where 3 other men were seated. There were all sorts of drinks laid out, from alcoholic to non-alcoholic, juice, wine, champagne, some whose names I could pronounce and others I couldn't. The guide pulled back a seat for me and asked what I would like to eat and drink. I told him I was fine. He walked away, and then one of the men at the table began to laugh.
Your first time, Abi?
He said, looking at me. I nodded in agreement while suspiciously looking around my table. I realized the other men were in a world of their own. One of them had a cigar in one hand and a glass in the other. The other was busy examining the powder-like content of a little transparent bag.
It's always like that on your first time. It's a world you might have heard of but never really believed it existed.
A world? What is this place?
Don't worry. In time, you'll understand. They call me Senior.
He stretched his hands towards me. I shook him and introduced myself as A-Zed. He didn't ask me about the name.
That's Balogun and Usman over there.
He said as he pointed to the 2 other men.
It might be a long night. So if you haven't eaten, I suggest you find something and eat. You can have anything. Anything.
He stretched the word and then gestured to the waiter, who seemed to have positioned himself close to us permanently. The waiter hurried towards us and Senior asked him to bring us 2 bowls of fish pepper soup. I looked around again, and just then, I wondered where I really was. I occasionally heard loud raised voices laughing or making one remark or the other about political issues. Our fish pepper soup arrived, and the moment I took in a whiff of it, my stomach reminded me that I was hungry. I examined the pepper soup and discovered that the fish in it was larger than any I had ever eaten or seen. I didn't know where to begin, but watching Senior, I soon began to eat, and it was the most delicious pepper soup I had ever had in my entire life. I reached for a pack of juice on the table, and one of the other men, Usman, chuckled out loud.
You don't drink?
Well, I'm working. All three men burst into laughter, and then Senior said,
It's part of the job, A-Zed. Here, try this.
He handed me a half-filled glass. I hesitated a bit, but then I took the glass from him. I was in a place I didn't know, so I needed as many friends as possible. At that point, I noticed some activity. It seemed some guests were ready to move their party elsewhere. I watched as Princess, Kassy, Tomi, and a few other girls walked away with 4 men. All of them were dressed in white traditional attires, and I could have sworn that one of them looked like the governor, and another like the man widely tipped to take over from him in the coming elections. Maybe it was the alcohol. I decided to take more of the pepper soup and less of the alcohol that I couldn't even identify. As time passed, more guests left the poolside and went into the main building. At some point, Usman took off his shirt and trousers and jumped into the pool, where he played around with the girls. Senior tried to engage me in conversation, but all he did was go on and on about himself. I reckon he was drunk as well. Time seemed to have flown by, but I realized it was just past midnight. And as I stood to stretch a bit, what the fuck?